Well, hello. I am so excited to begin this journey to look at the woman at the well in the scriptures and kind of get a different understanding than I had before. I started looking at it basically through another devotional that just said, "Hey, take a look at this scripture." And when I got to it, there was just a moment where I felt the Lord say, "Hey, you know what? Other women need to hear this. We all need to be encouraged, and we all probably want to sit with Jesus and hear what he would have to tell us today, and to know that he knows us, which is one of the really keen moments when he's talking with the woman at the well, that he knows her. And that was the clue to her that Jesus was the Messiah. And so we're going to take the next 6 weeks and just slowly read through. There's about 42 to 43 verses that we're going to look at. And we're just going to slowly take each small chunk at a time. I know you don't want to hear from me for 30 minutes each week, so we're going to try to keep it under the 10-minute mark. But we're just going to dive in and kind of get an understanding and a bearing of where we're at. And so today's session is just giving a little bit of the historical context, so we kind of know where Jesus is coming from, as well as where the woman at the well is coming from. And then we're going to dive in a little next week into the conversation that they have and go further through that. So it takes place in the Gospel of John, which is the fourth gospel in the New Testament. And it's in chapter 4 that we're going to begin. And it's right at verse 1. And I'm going to read right now verse 1 through 6. I am reading out of the New Living Translation. I prefer that translation, but you can read it out of any translation that you want. We know that there's a plethora of them out there. If you need help finding a translation, I'm more than happy to give you some recommendations for that. So let's start in verse 1. It says, Jesus knew the Pharisees had heard that he was baptizing and making more disciples than John. Though Jesus himself didn't baptize them, his disciples did. So he left Judea and returned to Galilee. He had to go through Samaria on the way. Eventually, he came to the Samaritan village of Sychar, near the field that Jacob gave his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired from the long walk, sat wearily beside the well at noontime. Now, let's just start at that first verse. The Pharisees. Jesus had heard the Pharisees were getting a little bit upset that he was baptizing more than John. So, if you don't know who the Pharisees are, you might have heard them around Easter because they're prevalent in the story of the crucifixion. But the Pharisees were basically the political and the religious sector in the culture at that time. Uh, a fun fact in one of the commentaries was they were self appointed. So they pretty much made themselves like, hey, we are the people who will tell you how to live your life based on the studying that we do and the time we spend interpreting to the law into what we want it to mean. And therefore, then we'll tell you the instructions and the laws by which you need to live by. We have, if you were to study our culture now, there is some of that going on now, right? We, not just the government, but just different groups will come along and they will say, hey, you have to live this way, or you can't do that, or you can't do this. Sometimes it's even in the Mean Girls, when we still have that. We're not in elementary school or high school, but even in work situations, there still can be that group of people that say, hey, you shouldn't live this way, or you better do it this way. And they try to force their rules and regulations onto our life without knowing who we are or investing in who we are. And so the Pharisees, again, were very legalistic. They were a separatist group, which basically meant if you didn't follow their rules, you were basically an outcast. And we hear a lot of different stories where there were people who had leprosy or were unclean. They would call the women who were going through their periods, they were unclean. Those people were just not to be touched and not to be included at all. And Jesus comes along into this story of history to say, hold up, that's not what I'm here for. I'm here for everybody. And it doesn't matter what your story is or where you came from or what you're going through. I want you to be a part of our community. I want you to be a part of my Father and my self's kingdom that we're building. And so that's where the rub comes with the Pharisees, is that he's telling people that the Pharisees have already said, no, you're an outcast. He's telling them, nope, you can fit with us. And so there's this uproar that's beginning to brew. Again, John 4 and Jesus at this time, he's really just beginning his ministry. He had just gotten baptized by John the Baptist. And so we are just now moving into Jesus's full-time ministry. He has his disciples and they are launching for the next 3 years in the story to reach the lost and let them know of a better way of living. And so, one of the things that we want to look for is why Jesus went through Samaria. Most of the Jews at that time would go around Samaria and take extra long time to do that because the Samaritans were unclean. We don't agree with what the way they believe, and so we're avoiding them. We're just not going to deal with it. And so today, we kind of have that, right? So we have Baptist and United Methodist, and they have different beliefs. And sometimes, especially in the last couple of years, it's become a they them type of or us them type of approach where if you don't believe what I believe, then you're out. I can unfriend you. I don't have to follow you, or I'm going to spend all of my time trying to convince you that you're wrong so that you'll join our party. And what Jesus is coming along saying is, hey, I came for everybody, and there's no sides that we are going to work on. And he preaches about the community and about how he wants our relationships to empower each other, not destroy each other. And so I just want to show you, just I'm a visual person. I want to give you a little bit of an idea of kind of where this story is taking place as we look at current events taking place in Israel. We can kind of look at where things were at in the biblical times. So I just want you to look at this map here. And this is the map of Samaria where Jesus is going through. He's on his way to Galilee and he's starting off in Judea. And so he's going this way. As I mentioned, most of the Jews would actually go over to this Jordan River, cross the river, and go around this way to avoid having to deal with the Samaritans or anything like that. If you're familiar with scripture, you know the story about the Good Samaritan and how he was the one that helped the individual because Jesus was trying to convince people that, look, your laws and the ways that you approach it aren't always right. It's not that the Samaritans are right either, but there is a level of compassion and love that we all should be giving to each other. And so again, here's the map. As we dive in a little bit further, you're going to see that right here is where the woman at the well conversation takes place. Shechem and Sychar are the kind of really close together. And I'm going to show you this next map, which is where Jacob's well is. So here's Sychar, here's Jacob's well, kind of on the outskirts of the town that Jesus is walking into. And so this gives us kind of an idea of where the story is taking place. To give you a little bit more of an idea, this is currently where Jacob's well is taking place. It actually was after about 100 BC. The Greek Orthodox area had taken over this area, and that culture had then basically bought their rights and took over Jacob's well. And through the years, it was destroyed and destroyed, and they've rebuilt it. And so the well sits beneath these two stairwells in this Greek Orthodox church. And so this is what the well currently looks like today. And so it is just interesting as we touch back to history to know one, it existed, right? It's not just a story. And two, how the world has still come around it and its significance is still important to this day. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of kind of where the well is, where it's related to Israel today as we continue on. One of the things that I want us to focus on as we close today is just to think about how Jesus went out of his way to reach people. There's a number of stories where he does that, or he'll stop and listen to people when the disciples are like, come on, let's go. And I always find the disciples to be pretty funny to watch as they don't understand because Jesus is really turning their approach to life upside down. They would study rabbis and they would study the Jewish culture and thought, okay, this is the way we're going. And Jesus was like, yeah, that's good, but here's better. Here's what we're going after. And it means you got to love your brothers. There's no Jews, there's no Samaritans, there's no Gentiles in my kingdom. You're all one. And for that culture, and even for our culture, that can be hard, right? We have African Americans and whites and Hispanics, and we get into a culture of, hey, it's my world, not your world. And we talk about immigration like these people aren't real. Or we talk about political parties, and it's like, oh no, we're just talking about issues, but yet it's connected to real people. And what Jesus comes along and says is, hey, knock it off. We're all in this together. And what I've come to do is to show you the better way of living, and that loving others and loving me are the top two priorities. That we have to love God, and by loving God, He is enabling us to then love others. So the world tries to tell us you got to live this way, you got to hang out with these people, you got to agree with us on this, or you're out. Yet Christ comes alongside and he throws those norms to the wind and says, no, love me and I will give you what you need. I will give you living water. I will accept you as you are today. I don't need you to go get fixed. I don't need you to go to 100 therapy sessions to get better. I will love you where you are at right now. And he will help us get through the day. He will give us purpose and hope for today and beyond that goes far beyond the to-do list that we have. So I wonder, if you were to meet Jesus tonight at a restaurant or at a store as you're getting groceries, what would you need him to say to you? Would you need him to say you're enough? Would you need him to just say, hey, you're doing great. I don't know how you do it. Would you need him to say, hey, you don't need to try any harder. You don't need to say yes to everything. Would you need him to say, it's okay to rest? You can stop going, going, going. You don't have to prove your worth to me anymore. Well, you need him to say, hey, I'm going to comfort you. I know this is hard. I know you lost someone, and I'm going to be here to comfort you and to love you and to care for you and to sit with you and to count your tears. Would you need him to fight for you? You're going through a struggle and you're just like, man, I can't do this on my own. I need somebody else to help me fight this. What I would encourage you to do between now and next week is to spend some time just asking God to show you in a practical way what you need to hear from him. Tell him what you need to hear and then ask him to show it to you in a practical way to where you know beyond a shadow of a doubt that that was God. Be on the lookout for how he might answer that, because it probably won't be the way that you expected it. I'm looking forward to journeying with you. Please use the comments to give any feedback or to say where you're struggling so that we can all be praying with each other. The goal is to be uplifting each other and being where we are not separated out by whatever our lives have given us, whether have children who are out of the household and just graduated, don't have children, married, divorced, possibly getting divorced. Doesn't matter. Those are all important things. But as far as the way that we accept each other and love each other, we're all equal in the eyes of Christ. And he wants us all to come to him and to say, I will help you through this. I will give you rest. Look forward to talking with you next week. Have a good one.